This is the new 100-400 f5 to 6.3 IS2. As an OM System ambassador, I was lucky enough that they sent this lens out to me at the end of November 2024. So I've had a couple of months to really put this lens through its paces and tried it out as much as I can for wildlife photography. Now for the 100-400 Mark II, there are three main things that's been updated. A fluorine coating has been added to the front element. It's got a detachable tripod collar with Arca Swiss mount compatibility. And the image stabilization has been updated so it now syncs with the camera. So in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the experiences and the photos that I've gotten with this lens so far. You can go to the link up here or in the description, and that'll take you to my blog post where you can have a closer look at the images that I've gotten and the settings that I took them with. It comes with a hood that you can unattach and flip around, put back on. Now this is a simple thing with the tripod collar. You can actually take that on and off without taking off the camera here. So unscrew it here and that will just come apart like that, and you can take it off. A simple thing, but really handy. I don't tend to use a tripod most of the time, so I very often take this off and leave it at home unless I know I'm going to need it. Now the other things are the same. You got the image stabilization on-off switch, you got the AF/MF switch, you got the focus limiter up top here, close 1.3 to 6 meters, you got the entire range, and you got 6 meters to infinity. On the other side here, you can lock it so that it doesn't come off. Mostly I've been using this lens here with my 011 Mark II. First off, the improvements in the image stabilization has been a huge benefit for me. It just fits the way I approach wildlife photography. I find it easier to get sharp images because I don't have to worry about camera shake or anything like that. It's also easier for me to film wildlife handheld that I use for my vlogs. Even at 400mm, I can film wildlife and hold it completely steady with this setup. And it allows me to get images with a lot slower shutter speeds, which is something I do all the time. You know, I'm out there in the mornings and the evenings, it's low light, and it becomes difficult without good image stabilization to hold everything still without a tripod. You can check out the other specs of this setup on the OM System website. Everything else is the same. It's got a minimum focus distance of 1.3 meters. It is still lightweight, compact, easy to take with, and that's what I did when I traveled to Fuerteventura last November. I could take this setup with me in my smallest Mindshift 18L backlight backpack, along with a few other camera gears that I needed, laptop, and I just stuffed t-shirts and everything I needed in there to go. I'm going to be sharing a lot of images and footage that I got from down there. It was also a great place to be in November because there's not many small creatures to try out close-up photography in Scotland in November and December. So very happy I was down there to catch up with some of the wildlife that was there. Now, one of the birds I really wanted to photograph in Fuerteventura was the Huabara bustard. This is a specially adapted bird for arid environment, and you can only find it a few places in the desert. It's actually a subspecies of Fuerteventura. The main population is in northern Africa. It is a relatively big bird, but surprisingly difficult to locate. The sun is coming up behind the hills. I have been searching for probably 45 minutes. Nothing. I'm using the thermal binoculars a lot as well, which can be really good in this landscape because everything is so well camouflaged. But at least with this, I can see the shape of it a lot better. But it's still tricky, really tricky. I'm just driving slowly, stopping, searching. There it is. I got one. Let me show you. It gets so exciting when you've been looking for this bird for over an hour, and there it is. As luck would have it, the sun was behind me, so I got some amazing golden light on this Huabara bustard as it passed by the car. As you can see in this image here, this is taken at 400mm, so all the way zoomed out, and it is tack sharp. So I'm really happy with the performance of this lens. For me personally, the synchronization of the image stabilization, the improvement that's been made to that, has allowed me to get more sharper images, because the way I shoot, I often shoot with slow shutter speeds. As you can see here, when I was in Fuerteventura, I was down on the beach one morning. Before the sun had come up, I've been walking away from this lighthouse. I turned around and I saw just the reflections of the lighthouse in the water. It just looked so nice and just begging to be photographed. There wasn't a wildlife there, but I had to zoom back to 100mm. But I took this image handheld at 1/5 of a second, absolutely no problem. Image stabilization is fantastic. Back in Scotland, I was photographing crested tits up in the Cairngorms, and I was testing out slowing, really using the slower shutter speed then. Obviously with an animal, you have to be aware that the animal move as well. So you got to take quite a few images to get some sharp. But as you can see here, this is a crested tit at 1/30th of a second. Again, not a problem with the image stabilization and the synchronization with the body. One of the most common birds in Fuerteventura is a Berthelot's pipit. Not sure if I'm saying that right. But just because they're common, they're not that easy to get a good photo of. But you see here, it was just jumping on this little bit of a rock in front of me, and that meant that I could use the background that was much further away and really blur it out. You know, with this lens, if you go all the way to 400, you put it at f6.3, and you consider your background, you can really create some fantastic bokeh and blurred out backgrounds. Now, when it comes to the autofocus performance with this lens, this isn't quite a fair comparison, because I'm usually using my 150 to 400, which is a much pricier lens. So it's not a fair comparison of the two, but that's the lens that I mostly use, so that's what I personally can compare it to. So it chases a little bit more than the 150 to 400, as you would expect, but with a couple of tweaks to how I actually use the autofocus. Considering my autofocus pattern and the autofocus limiter, it is not very difficult to get focus with this lens. And I will share in a future videos and tips on how I get focus using the autofocus, and the differences between using a lens like this one here compared to maybe the 300mm f4 or the 150 to 400 with a built-in 1.25 teleconverter. Using a telephoto lens like this for close-up photography is something I really enjoy doing. And I came across an area in Fuerteventura with a good population of dragonflies. These were, I think they were red darters, and I had loads of time with this one, so I had time to get front lit and backlit. I walked around it. You know, having that distance by using a telephoto lens as opposed to a macro makes it easier to maybe move around a little bit. Just be careful you're not casting a shadow or anything like that on the dragonfly, because then it'll most likely fly away. But here at full zoom, 400mm, it can give you a magnification factor of 0.57. So that's a pretty impressive result. Not a true one-to-one, but you can still, you know, create frame-filling images of the subject, because you can go as close as 1.3 meters and still get focus with this lens. The image stabilization really helps out photographing small subjects like this as well. First of all, by just trying to find it. You know, when you're quite close to this small thing and you can just half press the shutter to kind of stabilize the image, it's easier to find. And then when you're actually taking the image, it's easier to frame up so that you're not cutting off any edges or anything like that of the dragonfly or whatever you're photographing. So really handy. Also, if you want to try focus stacking or focus bracketing, it's ideal to have image stabilization synchronized. I use this lens quite a bit for birds in flight as well. At one point, this was actually quite close to where the lighthouse was, and after I'd photographed a sanderling and I had a turnstone and the seaweeds, I had a few spoonbills that I was photographing. I was just lying crawling on the sand, and I noticed that two of the spoonbills had kind of made their way out a little bit on some rocks. And suddenly one of them took flight. I was using a lower ISO and it meant a slower shutter speed, so I was ready for a flight shot. But as soon as that first one had taken off, I knew that that next one is probably going to go very soon. So dialed in my settings, maybe 1,000 or 1,600th of a second shutter for a bird of that size. And as you can see here, I got an image of it just as it's taken off. When it comes to keeping focus on the bird in flight, it can be tricky. I didn't get every image sharp of that whole sequence. I just followed it along. But I would imagine about half of the shots or something like that came out sharp. And this is the one I like the most, had the best wing position, and also you could see the feet and maybe even the droplets coming off there. I also really got to try out this lens at Argentine, photographing red kites back in Scotland. And there I really got to put it through its paces and photograph as many birds in flight as I possibly could. And again, in a future video, I will come out with some tips for the autofocus that I really kind of depended on for getting sharp images in that situation. I was very impressed with the results that I got using the teleconverter 1.4 with this lens. I think the only thing is that when you use it, your lowest f-stop is f9. Autofocus still works, but I might chase a little bit more, as you would probably expect. And when you're looking at the image in post, you zoom in 100%, you'll probably start to see a little bit of difference of not using the teleconverter. It might be a little bit softer, but I am very impressed with the results that I got using the teleconverter. Now, whether you should get this lens in your kit bag or not is not for me to say, but I can honestly say that I'm very impressed with it. I will continue using my 150 to 400 with the teleconverter built in as my main wildlife photography lens, but I really like that I have a lens that I can trust and that I can take out whenever I want to stay lightweight and compact. For me, this is going to be a lens that I'm going to be using on longer bike trips when I want to take photography gear with me, but I don't want to bring my big lens. Maybe I just want to go out for a walk in nature. I want to keep it lightweight, or I'm traveling somewhere where maybe I don't want to take all the gear with me when I want to have a lens that I can trust. Check out my blog post for the photos that I'll be showing in this video to see the settings. You may want to sign up to my newsletter where I send out one monthly email with tips and stories from the field using OM system for wildlife photography. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.